Hey everybody, welcome back to the Superbake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. So, have you ever had like scenes from movies that just for whatever reason they just take up real estate in your mind? Like you just think about them randomly for no apparent reason. For some reason, I had that earlier today. I kept thinking about this scene from the 29. I think it came out in 2019. The South Korean dark comedy Parasite. It's on Hulu, I think. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's definitely a really great movie. But there's a scene in the movie where the family that owns this house, their son is downstairs eating cake, and he spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. This couple that's actually living, or this guy that's living in the basement of that house, comes up to the top of the stairs from the basement and looks at the kid while he's eating, and it's like, and his face is kind of obscured in the darkness, so you can't really see him too well. But like from the kid's perspective, like he almost looks like a ghost just looking at him, and just like the look on his face is so creepy. I have no idea why, but for some reason that scene just keeps sticking in my mind, and I had to go back and watch it on YouTube. It is still terrifying to look at. It's like the only real scary scene in that entire movie. Like, it's not a scary movie, but for some reason, that scene stuck out to me. I have no idea why. Anyways, on to the episode. So tonight, gonna had a few things to talk about. I'm going to give my spoiler review for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for the PlayStation 5. Also, in that same vein, I'm going to talk about some somewhat concerning news with Square Enix. I'm going to talk about that, and also give my reaction to the Mufasa movie trailer that came out earlier this week. So, lots to talk about tonight. So first and foremost, I'll get into my review for Rebirth. So I beat that roughly a week ago, something like that. A little late to the game. I know there's plenty of reviews out, but still just want to give my thoughts on it. Just quickly to kind of go over my thoughts on Final Fantasy VII Remake and just the game in general. I never played the original. I had it on PlayStation 1, but I don't remember how far I got into it. I didn't get very far. I don't think I ever even really technically got out of Midgar. But I mean, I know the gist of the story. I've seen most of the cutscenes, so I know for the most part like what happens. It's been a long time, so I couldn't tell you like off the top of my head exactly every little like key moment in the story, but I pretty much get what happens. I know the story, I know the characters, so. And I did play Remake and beat that game and really enjoyed it. It was interesting that they only did like I thought it was interesting when I first played it that they only did Midgar. That was the entire story of Remake. It was interesting how they kind of diverted from the original story. Oh, of course, spoilers if you haven't played Remake or Rebirth. You know, this is your warning now. But yeah, the way they ended Remake, it seems like they're kind of branching off into different like multiverses, I guess. That was kind of the gist that I got from it, with the big Whisper Harbinger battle that you have at the end of Remake, and then it leads into Rebirth. So I don't really have any notes on this game. I was going to try to write down my thoughts, but I kind of want to do more of an off-the-cuff thing. This isn't going to be a super long review, so I'm going to try to keep this relatively short, just enough to get my thoughts across. But basically, I'm going to talk about three main categories. The characters, the story, and the gameplay. Those are the three main factors that I'm going to try to focus on for this. So first, I'll just talk about the story and get that out of the way. If you played the original, you probably know what to expect from this. The game Rebirth picks up pretty much immediately where Remake left off. You leave the city of Midgar. Cloud and his group are still looking for Sephiroth, trying to stop him from carrying out his devious plans. You end the first game with 5 party members: Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, and Red 13. Although I think at the end of Remake, Red 13, you couldn't really play as him. He wasn't playable, but he was in your party. So in this game, you actually can play as him. This one definitely takes more of like an open world approach as you travel through different parts of the realm, whatever the world that Cloud and his group live in. I don't remember the name of it, as they search for Sephiroth. And along the journey, you learn more about the characters' backstories, and really every character in this game gets a chance to shine. You learn a lot about Cloud's backstory, him and Tifa, where they came from their hometown, Nibelheim. You learn more about Aerith, where she's you learn about her ancestry, where she's something called like a Cetra, an ancient group of people. You learn more about Red 13, Yuffie. Also, full disclosure, I did not play Yuffie's story intergrade. But yeah, Yuffie, she joins the party in this as well. I don't think that that's much of a spoiler since she's in all the trailers, and Intergrade, came out a little while ago, so I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say that she's in this. And she is a playable character as well. And she's also one of my favorite characters in the game too. I really liked her bubbly personality. So yeah, then the game, basically that's the main story of the game, is the group continuing their search for Sephiroth, trying to stop him and going from town to town. And unlike in Midgar, you're out in the open way more in this game. This definitely feels much more like an open world game, whereas Remake felt like it was more of a streamlined game. There really wasn't a lot of open world aspects to it. Really hardly any, honestly. So that's definitely one thing that I enjoyed about Rebirth quite a bit. As far as the story goes, I would say overall the story is really good. I think it does a good enough job of retelling the original game, or at least from what I remember of it, even though it does kind of pad things out a little bit. That is kind of one of the major criticisms I have about this game, is that when I first played Remake, I didn't realize at the time that they were going to stretch the original game into 3 different games, that it was going to be a trilogy. When I found out about that, I was a little disappointed, but I get it. It's like how Hollywood is approaching movies these days. They got to stretch it out as much as they can. So from a business perspective, I understand it, but man, in this game, it really feels like we've already got, I feel like even if it was 2 games, you would still be, I still feel like the developers would be pushing their luck a little bit with this one, but man, it really feels like this game is a long one. And it is. I don't remember the exact time that I clocked in for it, but I feel like it took me roughly between 40 to 50 hours to beat this game, maybe more. I did do a little bit of side content, but for the most part, I focused on the story. And it still felt like it took me quite a while to get through it. This is definitely a longer game than Remake was. It's been a couple of years since I played that game. I don't remember how long it took me to beat the first one, but it definitely did not take anywhere near as long as Rebirth did. Rebirth definitely feels like it's at least twice as long as Remake. So, and again, that's if you just focus on the main story. I think I looked up online, if you try to complete the game, it's like well over 100 hours. That's like Dragon Quest territory. That's nuts to me. Yeah, I'm not going to complete this game. Like, I'm playing Hi-Fi Rush right now. That's an incredibly short game, and I don't even plan on completing that game, even though I am loving it. But anyways, not to get off track too much. But anyways, yes, that is one criticism I have about this game, is while the story is good, it does feel like the developers have added a lot of padding to it. It feels like there's a lot of segments within the story where like they force you to do what I would normally consider side content, but you have to do it. Like, there's a part in the game where Cloud has to do, it's kind of like this virtual, almost like Rock'em Sock'em Robots type virtual fighting thing. I don't remember if this was in the original game or not. It's been so long since I played it, and like I said, I never got that far, so I don't remember this, but the whole time I'm playing it, like, it's fine, it's charming, but I just kept thinking, like, what does this have to do with finding Sephiroth? Like, I get that they're trying to do this to convince somebody to help them, but I couldn't help but wonder, like, couldn't the developers figured out a better way to streamline the story a little bit? There's a lot of moments like that within this story where it just kind of feels like you're sort of just doing chores as opposed to trying to save the world. So that was kind of a problem I had with the story. It was just a lot of time where it felt like I was doing what would normally be side content in any other game. Other than that, I think the story is fine, and I think it does a pretty good job of fleshing out the characters pretty well. Now, as far as like where the story ends, and this is where I'm going to kind of get into spoiler territory a little bit, I'm not going to talk too much about what happens, but basically, from my understanding, the ending of this game, so I'm not going to talk about like that infamous scene from the original game. I'll let you play this game to kind of see for yourself like what happens there. If you're familiar with Final Fantasy VII, then you know what scene I'm talking about. It's pretty much the most infamous scene in the original game, the one that people talk about all the time. So I'm not going to talk about that too much, but basically this game ends pretty much right after that scene. It ends at the Temple of the Ancients, I think is what it's called. It's the Temple of the Cetra people, Aerith's people, where you find the black materia, and then the game basically ends and kind of sets up for part 3, whatever that's going to be called. So yeah, basically the story takes place from right when Cloud and his group leave Midgar to when they get to the Temple of the Ancients, or the Cetra, and that's basically where it ends, and sets up for the next one. Yeah, I want to say that that is like roughly halfway through the original game. So they've got like another half or at least another third to go. So I guess that works out pretty nicely. But I don't know. It's hard to imagine like if the next one's going to be longer or if they're going to try to make it shorter. I don't know. Like if I had to say this much, I would say like it felt like this game could have been maybe like 10 hours shorter. It really felt like, especially towards the end, I definitely felt like I was starting to I was ready for the game to end. It's not that I wasn't enjoying it or that I didn't have fun with it, but I was definitely ready for it to be over. I really hate to sound like this because I feel like I'm ripping on the game big time, but yeah, I mean, like it just kind of becomes exhausting. And not just Final Fantasy VII, the new Final Fantasy VII trilogy. I feel like a lot of big games now are kind of guilty of that, where it just feels like there's a little too much story. A lot of them just feel like they could have been shorter. Even just a few hours, I think, would have made a big difference. So overall, I think the story is good. It just feels like it could have been shorter. And that's just my opinion on that. But now I'm going to get into the gameplay. I'll talk about the characters last. But the gameplay overall, I mean, if you've played Remake, then you know exactly what to expect from this. The real-time action combat, it does feel more refined in this game. It definitely feels like the combat flows better. I like the synergy attacks they introduce in this one. So you're given the ability to pair up with another party member and do like these special synergy attacks. So like Cloud can attack with Tifa or Barrett, or they can even mix and match. Like Barrett can attack with Tifa or Aerith or something like that. Cloud, I think, always has to be in your party, so you can't really mix and match with other party members, but it does make for some interesting combat mechanics. It gives you a lot of freedom in how you approach certain situations, because some synergy attacks can be more effective on some enemies than others. And sometimes they're not even necessarily attacks. They could be like buffs. They could help give you like a stat increase, things like that. And the nice thing about them, too, is that, if I remember correctly, I think in order to use the synergy attacks, you have to fill both party members' ATB bars. So if you want to use a synergy attack between Cloud and Tifa, for example, you have to fill their AT bar, which means you have to switch back and forth between them. So that's nice because it gives you an incentive to switch to other party members instead of just playing as Cloud the entire time. And something else the game does too quite a bit is it breaks up the monotony by having segments where the groups will split up. So like you'll have one group that will be Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith, and then you'll have another group that'll be Yuffie, Barrett, and Red 13. And that's really nice because it gives you the chance to, I mean, it is kind of forcing you into these situations, but I actually liked it because each party member, for the most part, does feel very unique in combat. And these moments forced me to become more comfortable with playing as these characters and kind of learning their combat strategies. Like Barrett, for example, Barrett and Yuffie can use more range attacks since Barrett has his hand cannon and Yuffie has her throwing star. Aerith can cast spells. Tifa and Cloud and Red 13 are really more like close range fighters, although Cloud's kind of a jack of all trades type character. So, and of course you can mix and match materia with different party members as well. I always tried to give Cloud, as much materia as I could, like not just magic or attack materia, but also like healing materia just in case he needed it, in case Aerith wasn't around. But yeah, I like that they do that. I like that they kind of force you to mix and match party members and to kind of play as different party members in this game in combat. Because otherwise, at least me personally, I feel like if that wasn't the case, I probably would have just stuck with playing as Cloud as the default the entire game. So that was nice. It was a nice way to kind of break up the monotony, kind of add some variety to it. And combat just in general in this game, it feels better. Like, it feels very similar to Remake, but it feels, maybe it's just me, but I feel like in Remake the characters were a little bit more stiff. In this one, it feels more fluid. It feels like the characters are definitely a lot more mobile, especially with like the dodge mechanics. I don't remember the dodge too much in Remake, but it feels like in this one the dodging is definitely better. Attacks definitely feel better, they're flashier. It feels like you have more options in terms of like how you can build your character. Like there's this kick-ass like lightning build of Cloud that I saw online that I want to try out that looks just super sick. And I don't remember if there was anything like that in Remake. I don't really have a lot of criticisms in terms of the gameplay. It plays very well. It's very fun. If I had to nitpick, though, I would say some of the side or quote-unquote side content minigames the game has you do are sort of, they run the gamut between being fine to being kind of clunky at times. Like that Rock'em Sock'em Robots thing was okay. I mean, I got the hang of it. It was pretty obvious like what you had to do and stuff, but it definitely feels like it kind of slows down the momentum quite a bit. There's like the chocobo race, which again, I'm not really big into racing games. I think I've said that before on this podcast. So, I mean, again, I did fine on that, but I wasn't a huge fan of that. I think that's in the original, if I'm not mistaken. So it's fine. It is what it is, I guess. But I guess for me, when the gameplay focused more on just like the combat and the core mechanics of the game and the story, I was fine with it. I thought it was great. Anytime it went off into like side content story, that was where I sort of lost interest, I guess. Otherwise, the gameplay's really good. I don't really have a whole lot of negative criticisms to say about that. So, I mean, yeah, and like I said, it feels smoother than it did in Remake. It feels better for the most part. Like, the game just feels like it plays really well, in my opinion. And then, last but not least, I want to talk about the characters. And this is where I think the game really shines. Like, the story is good, if a little padded, and the gameplay is also fun as well. But the characters, to me, I think that is the real star of this game. Because in Remake, the characters were definitely likable. You liked Cloud, you liked that even though he was kind of a loner type, he still had a bit of a badassness to him. He had a bit of a goofy side to him, kinda, at times. It's almost like the fact that he's so quiet and serious is almost kind of what makes him funny when he's paired up with like more animated characters. And they kind of continue that in this one. They definitely do a good job of endearing these characters to you. The standouts to me were definitely Barrett, who is honestly probably one of my favorite characters in this game, and Red 13. The backstory with Red 13, which I didn't know from the original one because I never got this far, that part was great. That was definitely a big surprise when you learn more about him and kind of like who he really is. If you play the game, you'll kind of understand like what I'm talking about. And then Yuffie. I think those three are probably my favorite characters in the entire game. Barrett, Red 13, and Yuffie. Just every scene they're in, they're great. I love Yuffie's bubbly attitude. Red 13 is fantastic. To me, he steals the game. He steals the game, and I think it's chapter 5, where you have to do the Queen's Blood tournament. That part was fantastic. I'm not going to give away the scene of what happens, but it's awesome. I was not a big fan of Queen's Blood, the card game. Like, I played a little bit of it. I mean, I got it, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. But the scene with him in chapter 5 was just absolutely great. I feel like every character in this game is fantastic. They play their role very well. The voice acting is also done very well too, and just some of the backstories you see for these characters, like I said, Barrett, Red 13, they really do a good job of really making you understand the motivations behind these characters, as well as giving you kind of more of them to hold on to or to latch on to. Like, Barrett's backstory was really compelling. I actually genuinely found myself like, even though again it didn't really feel like it had much to do with like the main story with Sephiroth, it was so compelling and so just engaging that like I found myself legitimately invested in everything that was happening. And it's a sad story too, and it was part of the reason like why Barrett became like one of my favorite characters in the game. But the thing is, there really is no weak links. There are no weak links in this game. Like, everybody feels like they pull their weight very well. Every party member feels, they have their great moments in the game. The only downside I will say as far as the characters go is that in this one, you get every party member is a playable character except for Vincent Valentine and Sid. They are in the game, but they show up more towards the tail end of the game, and Sid is only really there to kind of be like your means of transport. And Vincent shows up as sort of a boss character, which I don't remember if you fought him in the original or not. I don't remember that very well. But yeah, he shows up. He does join your party, but he doesn't actually fight with you. So I was a little disappointed with that. I'm guessing that they're going to have a bigger role in combat in the next one. So it's too bad that we're going to have to wait another few years before we get to see those two as playable characters. But because I really like Sid, I like Vincent as well. But yeah, that was kind of a disappointment as far as the characters go. The Turks, Reno, Rude, Elena, I think is her name. They're in this. They're same goofy badass personas they are from the original. I really like Kate Sith's character. I couldn't get the hang of him in combat very well. I think he's supposed to be more of a magic caster type character. Not really sure. I liked him a lot. I think he was great every scene he was in. And I loved his level with like the gold saucer, kind of like the Halloween hotel thing. That was really cool. And then, of course, you got Sephiroth, the quintessential badass villain in this one, like arguably probably one of the most famous video game villains in video game history. Yeah, he's in this game. You get to see more of his backstory between him and Cloud and stuff, like when he first arrives at Nibelheim, when they're still part of Soldier. So everything they do to flesh out these characters is done exceptionally well. And that, I think, like I said, the character part of this game, I think that was definitely where it really shined. So yeah, everything having to do with that, I absolutely loved. And yeah, it made me really want to do the side content. And there's tons of side content to do in this game. Like, that's one thing I would definitely say is like all the stuff you can do on the map is like, I started out at first kind of doing all that side stuff, like discovering the different locations on the map, the icons and stuff like that. But then I realized pretty quickly, like, if I do all this, I'm never going to get through this game. So I'm just going to kind of wrap up in conclusion. Overall, yes, I loved Rebirth. I think it's definitely a better game than Remake. It's not without its problems, though. Like, while the story is good, it definitely feels a little bit bloated. I definitely think this game could have been shorter. It definitely felt like it could have been maybe like 5 to 10 hours shorter. I think that would have helped maybe with the flow of the game a little bit more. Combat is still good. It feels a little bit more fluid. It feels better than it did in Remake. The inclusion of synergy attacks, I really enjoyed. I liked it. Like I said, I think it gives you incentive to play as each character and kind of experiment and mix and match. The characters, to me, are definitely the best part of the game. To me, that was absolutely the highlight. If for nothing else, I think the characters alone make this game worth playing. It's just kind of disappointing that the full party doesn't really come together, until the end of the game. And even then, you don't really get to play as, like, Vincent and Sid, for example. So it would have been nice if they could have been, like, fully integrated in your party at the end of this game, but I guess that's what they're saving for part 3. So if I had to give it a letter grade, I'd probably say a solid A, for sure. A or A-. Like, it's not perfect, but it's still a fantastic game, and in my opinion, I think it's definitely better than Remake. So if you enjoyed Remake, I think you're definitely going to enjoy this game tremendously. So now I'm going to talk about some somewhat concerning news with the company Square Enix. So I saw an article the other day saying that Square Enix apparently had absorbed, I think it was something like $140 million in, I guess, what's being called content abandonment losses. So apparently they did not perform as well at the end of their fiscal year, which was March 2024, and now they have decided to, I guess from what I read, it sounds like they're basically stopping production on several games that are already in development, and I guess their goal is to now focus on specific games that they believe are going to be more profitable. At least that's kind of the gist that I think a lot of people are getting out of this story. I guess some of their games haven't sold as well as they had hoped. It sounds like Final Fantasy Rebirth, like, I don't think there's actually any, like, specific figures available right now, but it sounds like it hasn't been selling as well as they had hoped. So now, I guess because of that, they have essentially decided to stop production on several titles that they were currently working on. And I guess now their focus moving forward is to just focus on, I guess, what they would consider to be profitable games. So this has a lot of people, myself included, understandably, a little bit concerned, because I guess my first question is, like, what does this mean for, the future of, big game franchises from them? Obviously, the Final Fantasy series is one of their biggest series, Rebirth. I can't imagine Rebirth didn't sell well, but I mean, I feel like Final Fantasy 16 was a commercial success, so hopefully more people will go out and buy Rebirth. I'm not really sure right now. I guess we'll have to wait and see when they release their figures on that game. But this definitely has me concerned about, like, the future of game series like, well, Kingdom Hearts, the next Kingdom Hearts game. I know that's a game that's in development right now. And also Dragon Quest. That especially has me concerned for Dragon Quest, because I love that game series. I think it was Dragon Quest VIII was the very first one that I played. Before that, I was aware of the Dragon Quest series, but, like, I never really played any of them. But then I played Journey of the Cursed King on the PlayStation 2 way back in the mid-2000s, and just absolutely fell in love with it. And since then, I've been playing Dragon Quest titles. Like, I've played Dragon Quest XI. That one's such a great title. I've also played, it was on the 3DS. It was, I can't remember what it was. I feel like it was a remake of an older game, one of their older titles, but I can't remember what it was called. But I really enjoyed that one too. I know it doesn't sound like it since I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, like in recent years, in the last 10 to 15 years, I've really gotten more into the Dragon Quest series. And I know a couple of years ago they had, like, the announcement of Dragon Quest 12. So what has me concerned about this is the fact that Dragon Quest, I know the series is very popular in Japan. I don't think it's quite as popular in the United States. I mean, I do think it is gaining momentum, but I don't think it's as popular here as it is in Japan. So this really has me concerned. Like if Square Enix chooses to focus mainly on certain titles, does this mean Dragon Quest is going to take a back seat? Because we've got is it Dragon Quest 3, the HD remake? I think that's what they had going on. Let me double check real quick. HD remake. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3. Yeah, the HD 2D remake, which was being made in the style of kind of like Octopath Traveler, like sort of like that 90s pixel art. I remember we had the premiere for that that was back in 2021, and we still haven't really seen anything more for that. And I think this month is supposed to be is it Dragon Quest month? I can't remember if that's what it's called, but I know this month I think is kind of a big deal for the Dragon Quest series. So maybe we'll hear more about it at some press conference or something later this month about that. But yeah, this really has me concerned about what it's going to mean for the future of Dragon Quest titles. Does this mean that 12 is going to get delayed? Was 12 one of the titles that was pushed back? That's the other thing too, is that we really don't know right now what titles were pushed back. I mean, as far as I'm aware, Square Enix has not released any details on that, so we really don't know what's being worked on, what's being put on the back burner, and the games that have been delayed because of this. Is this indefinite? Is this just for a short time, or is this maybe for several years? So I guess time will tell, but this definitely has me concerned. But I think Square Enix has also tried to say this too, is that this isn't necessarily just all doom and gloom. What this will hopefully mean is that what they're going to try to do is the games they do work on, they're going to try to give that more of their focus. So I guess the idea is that instead of being divided across several dozen projects, they're going to try to focus on maybe just a small handful of them and really try to put their full effort into it. So my hope is that maybe this means that, say, Square Enix goes from working on maybe 6 or 7 games at a time, maybe they only work on 2 or 3, and then those 2 or 3 are really high quality. But it sounds like they're really going to try to focus on titles that they know for sure are going to be profitable, which I understand it. I get it. It's a business, game development. It is a business. They got to make sure that their product is going to sell well. So I do get it. But yeah, just from a longtime fan of the company, I'd be lying if I said this didn't have me a little bit concerned. So I really enjoyed Rebirth. I liked Final Fantasy 16. I didn't think it was anything incredible, but I really enjoyed it. So, and I love the Dragon Quest series, and I really like Kingdom Hearts, even though I am willing to admit that it is a very flawed series, and kind of silly and ridiculous in many ways. But I really want to see more from the studio, so I'm really hoping that this is not a bad sign of things to come. Hopefully, this is just sort of a speed bump in the road, but maybe after some corrections, maybe we'll be able to go back to getting some really strong titles from them. But if nothing else, I hope maybe this is a wake-up call for people to go out and buy Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and really kind of encourage them and hopefully convince them that, okay, yeah, this game is profitable. Because I mean, I would assume with part 2 of 3 for the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, surely they're not going to stop with just part 2. I mean, they've got to finish it, right? I mean, I know money talks, and obviously if Rebirth, sold horribly, which I'm sure it hasn't, but if it did, hypothetically, I mean, who knows? I mean, I could definitely see them scrapping it if it didn't sell well, but I really can't see that happening. Like I said, the Final Fantasy series is one of Square Enix's best-selling series, if not their best. And 7 is arguably the most famous one. That's the one that I think most people are familiar with. When people think of Final Fantasy, that's the one that I think generally comes to mind first for most people, especially people who aren't familiar with the series. Because I feel like before I really got into it, that was what I always thought of. When people asked me about Final Fantasy 7, I would always say oh yeah, the one with that guy with the big-ass sword. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell on this one, but it's definitely a little bit concerning, but hopefully it's not all bad news. All right, and last but not least, I'm going to give my thoughts on the trailer for the new Mufasa movie. This is supposed to be the prequel film to The Lion King, the 2019 live-action film. I remember reading somewhere that Disney was planning a Mufasa film, and I'm going to be completely honest, I forgot about it. Like, I completely forgot that this was something that was in the works. It slipped my mind for quite a while, but we've got a teaser trailer for it, and I watched it, and I have thoughts. First and foremost, I'm not overly excited for this movie. It looks... I'm trying to think of the nice way of putting this. It looks like exactly what I would expect from a quote-unquote live-action Lion King prequel film from Disney. I say quote-unquote for animated because... or for live action because technically it is animated because these are all CGI animals, so they're not really real. Obviously, they don't really have real lions and warthogs and hyenas on scenes together because that would just be just pure chaos. But we don't get a whole lot as far as like what the story is supposed to be in this one. It looks like it's going to have kind of a similar premise to the Lion King story. It's Mufasa from the time he's a cub to when he grows up into an adult lion and takes over Pride Rock as king of the Pride Lands. It looks like, I guess, he comes from humble beginnings in this movie, like they say, because Rafiki is narrating the trailer, and he says that Mufasa came from nothing. He did not come from noble birth. So I guess this is supposed to be kind of like, I guess, sort of like an underdog type story, like Mufasa going from being basically a nobody to the king of the Pride Lands. So get to see a little bit of that in this trailer. There's actually a lot of familiar faces that show up in here, like Zazu's in here. Of course, Rafiki, I mentioned him before. It looks like we get to see a little bit of Scar in this trailer. And then this really surprised me. Timon and Pumbaa are also in this. And it looks like there's a scene where they're going up against some lion. It looks like it's potentially Scar, which that's interesting. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out. It really makes me wonder, like, how old are Timon and Pumbaa? I mean, I don't know. I'm probably getting way too into this, but like we had the Lion King 1.5, where we saw like they were kind of involved, where it kind of retconned some of the stuff in Lion King, where it looked like Timon and Pumbaa were kind of operating in the background. And now it seems like this is going to kind of do something similar, where they're also involved in this. I mean, I guess if it's Scar when he's an adult, I guess you could make the argument that maybe they're not that old, but if they are in there when Mufasa's a cub, it's going to be like, so were they just like old men when they ran into Simba? I don't know. Like, when I saw them in the trailer, I couldn't help but wonder, like, okay, so pretty sure they're in this movie because they're fan favorites. But yeah, I mean, like I said, beyond the fact that it seems like it's about Mufasa's rise to power in the Pride Lands, I didn't really feel like we got a whole lot in terms of what the story is, but I'm sure we're going to see other trailers down the road as far as like what this is going to be about. It looks like there's definitely some scenes that kind of borrow elements from the original movie too. Like, there's a scene where it looks like there's a stampede of what look like elephants. So I'm guessing we're going to get sort of like a similar thing like with the wildebeests in the original one. I really hope this isn't going to be like a beat for beat like remake of the 2019 film, where it's basically Simba's story, but now Mufasa is the main character. So hopefully this is going to be something a little bit different. It looks like it's at least trying to tell a somewhat unique story. So I guess in that respect, it could be interesting. Like, I'm just glad that it's not another just Disney remake. I'm glad that it is at least going to be a new story. So I guess in that respect, I guess it's a little refreshing to see, but I can't really say this trailer did much to really get me excited. I will say this much though. It does look like the animal faces emote a little bit more in this trailer. Like, there's a scene in the trailer where Mufasa, it looks like he's on the back of either a hippo or a crocodile or something. And he has like this look of like terror on his face. In the 2019 film, it really felt like none of the characters emoted, even in scenes where like something terrible was happening. Like, for example, the spoiler alert, the scene where Mufasa dies. It really didn't seem like Simba was that upset, which is why I've always preferred the 1994 Lion King, or 95, whenever it came out, the mid-90s movie, the actual 2D animated film versus the 2019 CGI film. Because in that one, part of the charm was that you could actually see the expressions on the characters' faces. That was kind of what sold the movie, and at least to me, what made it such a compelling, great story. And in the 2019 movie, you don't have that because they're photorealistic. Well, animals can't emote like people can, so you lose a lot of that, at least in my opinion. This one, it does seem like they're at least, well, again, in that one scene with Mufasa, it seems like they're at least trying to give the animals a little bit more expression in their faces. So I don't know how that's going to translate well, because at the same time, these are supposed to be like photorealistic animals. So I kind of feel like if they emote too much, it's going to kind of take away from that. That's why I really think that they should have just left a lot of these Disney movies just as 2D animated films, like especially The Lion King. I just don't know if I don't think it works as a live action. I keep saying that, as a photorealistic movie. Beyond that, I mean, nothing else in this trailer really stood out to me. It looks pretty. There's a lot of really impressive looking CGI in the film. There's a scene in the film or in the trailer where Mufasa's diving off this cliff, and you can kind of see like the sun, the way it reflects off of his fur, like the edges of his fur. That looks pretty good. Like, for the most part, the CGI does look pretty good. Like, I don't have a problem with it. It's a good looking film. It's just, I guess I'm more concerned about the substance versus the style of it. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really overly excited for it. I guess I'll probably check it out when it comes out on Disney Plus. I might just give it a quick view, because I do like the Lion King movies, and I am interested in kind of just seeing what they do with this. Hopefully they can kind of give kind of interesting backstory with Mufasa. That's another concern that I have with this, is this just going to be like just leading into all the, like, setting up all the pieces perfectly for like what happens in The Lion King, but then not much else. Like, if you are going to tell this story, if you are going to give us this backstory on this, really infamous Disney character, then at least do something interesting with him. Whether it's giving Mufasa kind of a dark past, or giving him a real struggle to go from being just a nobody to the king of the Pride Lands. Just give us something compelling. That's what I want. Don't just give us just a soulless movie that's just, oh, here's Mufasa. He's a cub. Oh, now he's grown up and now he's king. There we go. Okay, now you know what happens before The Lion King. Like, no, give me an actual story. Like, just because it's a prequel to The Lion King, it doesn't mean that it has to be just The Lion King. Like, it can have its own compelling characters and even villain if it wants. That's another thing too that I would like to see from this, is like, give me a compelling villain. That was something that Disney films, at least in my opinion, were always really well known for, was having great villains. Like one of my all-time favorites, Scar's a great villain from the original Lion King, but one of my all-time favorites is Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective. Like, he's a fantastic villain, and like, that's something that I really want to see from Disney films again, is give us these really creepy, scary antagonists for the hero to overcome. If they can give us something like that in this film, I'm not expecting them to, then I could see it being successful. But yeah, as it stands from this trailer, other than looking good and maybe having a few interesting action moments and then showing some big characters from the Lion King film, I don't really see much else in here that looks that compelling. And like I said, I see some things in here that kind of have me concerned that it's going to follow a lot of the same beats as The Lion King. Like, there's a scene in the trailer where it shows Mufasa looking up and he sees the kings of the past. Like, he sees the lion face in the sky, which is what we saw in the original Lion King film. There's a scene where it shows a bunch of animals like walking in a circle. It looks like they're doing some kind of musical number with what looks like Mufasa in the middle, which reminds me a lot of I Can't Wait to Be King from The Lion King. So that's why I'm a little bit concerned. Like, all those scenes to me make me think like, okay, like, are they just doing The Lion King again, but just with a different main character? That's what I don't want to see. Yeah, I don't even want to say I'm cautiously optimistic about this movie. I guess I just don't really care. Like, I didn't really need a prequel to The Lion King anyway, so this just feels like, okay, cool, I guess. If it's good, awesome. If it's not good, then I guess I can just ignore it and just pretend like they stopped at The Lion King 1995 and maybe The Lion King 1.5. I don't know. I mean, anyway, yeah, feel free to comment on my YouTube channel if you want and kind of give me your thoughts on this. I can't really say it left too much of an impression on me one way or the other, so I guess time will tell. Who knows, maybe this movie will knock my socks off, but I really doubt it. Alright everyone, that's going to conclude tonight's episode. Once again, I am on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube, and also Twitter/X, so feel free to follow me on there. If you like what you heard, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and I will catch you all next time. Later.